It's 1965. The air in Ralph Nader's tiny Washington, D.C. office was thick with stale coffee and desperation, literally buried under mountains of grim crash reports, engineering schematics, and internal memos. Each document a silent scream from the asphalt. He was trying to prove a terrifying, almost unbelievable truth. The Chevrolet Corvair wasn't merely flawed. It was a known, inherently unstable, deadly death trap. The chilling question wasn't if it could fail, but if General Motors, America's industrial titan, really knew the lethal risks they were marketing to millions of unsuspecting families. Nobody gave him a second thought. A lone, unknown lawyer, armed only with facts and an unyielding moral compass, daring to challenge the biggest, most influential corporation on earth. Ralph Nader's story begins in 1934 in a tight-knit community called Winsted, Connecticut. His parents, Nathra and Rose, were Lebanese immigrants, hard-working and vocal. Nathra ran a local restaurant, a hub for civic discussion. Ralph grew up steeped in arguments about local issues, justice, and the sometimes ugly truth of corporate power. I learned early, Nader would recall, that if you don't use your voice, the powerful will always win. That realization, forged in those kitchen table debates, would define his life's work. By the mid-1950s, Nader had honed that voice. He graduated from Princeton, then Harvard Law, but found traditional law practice didn't quite fit his restless drive. He gravitated towards consumer advocacy, an obscure field back then. He took on small cases, wrote articles, trying to chip away at corporate indifference. His early targets weren't the Goliaths yet, but he was learning the ropes, the legal loopholes, the immense power of corporate PR. He learned from professors like David Reisman, who opened his eyes to the systemic nature of power. This was Nader's workshop. His first product, essentially, was his growing reputation as a tenacious truth seeker. He wasn't just another lawyer. He was someone willing to go there. But the early battles, they were bruising. In 1957, Nader tried to raise alarms about medical device safety. He wrote passionate letters, detailed reports. The response? Crickets. Nothing happened. The system simply swallowed his concerns whole, spat them out, and moved on. It was a stark lesson. Facts alone weren't enough. The sheer inertia of big industry, the lack of public awareness, the indifference of regulators. It was a wall. He saw the damage that silence caused, and it only sharpened his focus. He realized he needed a bigger hammer, a clearer target, and a story the public couldn't ignore. Then came 1959, and General Motors unveiled the Chevrolet Corvair. This wasn't just another car, it was GM's revolutionary answer to European compacts. Rear-mounted, air-cooled engine, independent swing-axle rear suspension. Sounds progressive, right? Fast forward to the early 1960s, and the whispers started. Actually, they weren't whispers. They were loud, terrifying crashes. Drivers reported the Corvair had a nasty habit of sudden, violent oversteer. You're making a routine turn, and suddenly you're fishtailing, spinning, or worse, rolling over. People were dying. Why? That innovative swing axle. Under certain conditions, especially with improper tire pressure, it could tuck under during a hard corner. One wheel would dig, the car would lift, and boom. It became deadly. So, did GM know? Well, by 1964. Before. Nader's book, GM implemented a transverse leaf spring in the rear suspension. A fix for a problem they supposedly didn't know about? Nader smelled a rat. He saw the engineering flaw, the human cost, and GM's quiet scramble to cover it up. He was about to make that smell undeniable. The year is 1965. Nader publishes Unsafe at Any Speed, dedicating an entire blistering chapter to the Corvair. It wasn't just a critique, it was an indictment, backed by engineering analysis and accident reports. The book became a sensation. Suddenly, GM had a huge problem, and Nader was its face. And what does a corporate giant do when challenged by one persistent man? They try to crush him. In 1966, GM launched a covert operation. They hired private investigators to harass, surveil, and dig up dirt on Nader. Think tailing him, making creepy phone calls, sending prostitutes to lure him. It was a full-blown espionage campaign. A GM executive, unaware he was confessing to a Senate committee, admitted they wanted to shut him up. They thought they could make Nader disappear, but instead they lit a fuse. The scandal erupted. GM's dirty tactics blew up in their faces, making Nader a household name and a martyr for consumer rights. In 1966, Nader testified before Congress. He didn't just point fingers, he laid out a case for federal oversight, for government-mandated safety standards. The old guard scoffed. Personal responsibility, they cried. Don't blame the car. But Nader had the receipts, the public outrage, and the momentum. That same year, Congress passed the National Traffic and Motor Vehicle Safety Act. It established the first federal auto safety standards. It wasn't just a win. It was a revolution. The game had changed, and Nader had changed it. By 1969, the Corvair was dead. Sales plummeted, crushed by Nader's expose and its own terrible reputation. GM finally pulled the plug. The car, once heralded as innovative, was now synonymous with corporate negligence. Then in 1972, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, published a report concluding the Corvair's handling was comparable to other contemporary cars. Wait, what? A federal agency saying it was okay after it died. But by then, the damage to its reputation was irreversible. Nader himself, reflecting on his battles, once said, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." Nader refused to do nothing. He took on the mightiest corporation in the world, exposed its fatal flaws, and forced a nation to demand safer products. From quiet Winsted to the halls of Congress, Nader didn't just critique cars. He permanently redesigned the landscape of American consumer protection. So, did GM know the Corvair was a deadly death trap? Our journey through the hidden memos, the design compromises, and the tragic accidents points to an undeniable truth. Yes, they absolutely did. Evidence suggests that internal reports, test results, and even dissenting engineers flagged critical design flaws, particularly the swing axle suspension's tendency to cause severe oversteer and rollovers under specific yet common driving conditions. Yet driven by aggressive cost-cutting and a fervent desire to rush the car to market, these warnings were largely ignored, sometimes even actively suppressed. The initial design, conspicuously lacking a crucial front anti-roll bar present in later models, was a known hazard, making the early Corvair a fundamentally unstable and dangerous vehicle at its operational limits. This wasn't a flaw discovered in hindsight. It was a risk taken with clear internal foresight. The fallout, fueled by Ralph Nader's relentless advocacy in Unsafe at Any Speed, didn't just hurt GM's reputation, it sparked a revolution. Before the Corvair, automakers largely self-regulated, prioritizing superficial aesthetics and raw power over fundamental driver protection. The public outcry, the subsequent lawsuits, and Nader's searing expose forced Washington's hand. The creation of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, and the establishment of comprehensive federal safety standards were direct, undeniable consequences of the Corvair scandal. This saga transformed automotive engineering from a pursuit of style and power into a mandate for safety, saving millions of lives through federal regulation. What was lost was trust, but what survived was an uncompromising demand for public accountability. If this journey into automotive history and the profound impact of the Corvair scandal resonated with you, if you appreciate understanding how such pivotal moments shape the world we live in, please consider hitting the like button. Every single tap tells YouTube that this kind of meticulous research and storytelling deserves to reach more viewers who genuinely value learning about how our standards for safety were forged. Subscribe to the channel and you'll find a new chapter from the hidden corners of history and innovation here every week.